Some very big updates for the uranium stock sector that's happening over this weekend and going into the next week, what it might mean for the uranium sector. And you all did it. You guys got 1,000 likes on the last video, so I'm going to be completing the uranium documentary this weekend and release it this week. So go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button below. We're going to jump right into this. Some very big news. So the first thing happened, I asked everyone in the uranium sector, and it almost got about 2,000 votes. And I asked everyone what the 2022 catalyst might be. And pretty much about 800 to 900 people said they think the SPUT New York Stock Exchange listing is going to be a big catalyst. Now, I can agree that could be very big, especially if a lot of the spot uranium gets taken up. But I still think what was in second place, Kazatomprom in the world, 43% of the world's production of uranium right now, this is very big and it's a developing story. And not a lot of people understand what's going on. I'm going to bring you up to speed with what is really happening. And then third and fourth place, it was EU with nuclear. And that's actually pretty big. We'll touch on that. Now, EU and nuclear, there's going to be a lot of money flowing to uranium. 568 billion, they said, US dollars that's going to need to be put into the nuclear energy sector between now and 2050. But by 2030, it's going to be like 50 to 60 billion dollars. So this is pretty big. This is going to be, I like this quote. They said the green transition will lead to an industrial revolution of unprecedented scale. So that's really big for the uranium sector. Now, I think, I know a lot of people, that was third place. And then the next one's the Uranium Sprott takeover. Now, I think this could be very big, and it could be a part of that whole cycle that we see with uranium, where SPUT takes away uranium and then they buy up, the fund buys up these uranium stocks and then they go up. And then, it's just a continuing cycle. So I think that'll be a good catalyst. But the biggest one to me is Kazatomprom, and I'll show you exactly why. I tweeted this out, and I really want everyone to understand what's going on. So Russia is now protecting Kazatomprom's uranium assets. The world really relies on Kazatomprom. Right now, the US is looking at sanctions on Russia, and we do not know what could happen if the US persists with that and, Russia actually tries to invade Ukraine, and what could happen. Now, you can see there are hundreds of thousands of troops, of Russian troops all throughout Ukraine. And look, Kazakhstan's very close. They've got the #1 supply, producer of uranium, and then they also are number 9 in oil. So could this be a strategic move, or could it just be a coincidence? Nobody really knows, but from an investment standpoint, what I'm looking at is I see U.S. utilities, especially in the U.S. government, seeing this as a threat to not only national security, but the future supply of energy for America. Now, the U.S. has a lot of ties to Kazakhstan with business and energy. So this is really big for the uranium outlook, because right now, with Russia protecting them, there are a lot of things going on over there. And I want to show you this. So the Biden administration this week is really heading into an intense week. They said in this article, I really like this. They said intense week with Russia. So the US has already condemned the massing of tens of thousands of Russian troops along the border with Ukraine. But the White House seems to be taking a different approach to Russian involvement in Kazakhstan. So they said in this article that Kazakhstan does bridge a gap between Russia and China, as we said, Asia and Europe, and they really are one of the key locations. So they're rich in resources. As we know, uranium #1, 9th in the world for oil. It's a critical location from a security point of view. As I said before, U.S. companies are heavily invested in Kazakhstan's energy sector, and the U.S. saw the country as a relatively stable, though not a democratic partner. So I really do think that because now Kazakhstan's president has invited the troops to come in to protect these assets, it's really going to be a crazy week, I think, for the uranium sector. So in this chart here, you can see that Russia has 100,000 plus troops all throughout Ukraine. Now, this is very big because the U.S. recently condemned this, and the U.S. is looking at ordering sanctions on Russia, and this would include bans on the export to Russia of advanced electronic components, software, and related technologies that uses American equipment. And then Russia could be added to the most restrictive group of countries for export purposes. So they're looking to have these big sanctions on Russia, and this really could lead to some crazy things if Russia persists You know, the US said they would not be leaving in, you know, Eastern Europe, that they're not going to pull out. As we can see here, Kazatomprom's website is still down. So I really do think that, especially in the spot market, we're going to see uranium start to take off again. Now, if you look at this chart, I put this out, I tweeted it out, and if you look back to 2006 to 2007, we had the biggest run in uranium. It went up 200% in 12 months. And this was right before the floods there with Cameco. And so world's production of uranium, the supply and the production for the future was somewhat in jeopardy. So we saw utility contracts start the year before. We had another mine flood there, MacArthur River, and then obviously Cigar Lake. So we saw a record 250 million pounds contracted in these long-term contracts, but we started seeing the spot price run up. Now we are exactly where we were June of 2006, right? You know, that took 12 months to run up 200%. We ran about 40% in the last few, 3 to 4 months, that we could really see people come back to the spot market. And this includes Sprott Physical Uranium Trust buying up, you know, they bought up 1 million pounds. I think it was the 4th biggest purchase that they did. If they continue to do this and they get that New York Stock Exchange listing, we could see uranium do a similar run. I think it could go higher because we have, Kazatomprom said, 700 million pounds will be coming back into contracting. You can see these big spikes here, and that's what it did to the price of uranium. I think that the thing's going to happen again, but it's going to overshoot. I think it's going to be over $200. And this is long-term, you know, in the next few years. But in the short term, I think that a lot of money is going to start to flow to uranium. A lot of money is going to start to flow to the nuclear energy sector. As we saw before in that chart, it said $568 billion in the next 20 to 30 years. And that's a lot of money coming into a small sector like uranium. I believe the 70 uranium stocks or so, their market caps combined are less than that of Nokia. So this will be a very big week for uranium stocks, and I think that we could see the spot price run back over $50. I think a lot of money is going to be flowing into the US producers mainly. And I do think that the smaller uranium stocks will see big runs, but the smaller ones, the explorers, they're still far from production. But the ones that could bring somewhat of production in the next year or two, these producers, obviously, I think a lot of money is going to flow into those. And that's where I'm going to keep my eye on. And I think the overall uranium outlook for the future, the price is going to go up to where it needs to go, $70+. I think we'll start to see that this year, especially with all of these catalysts coming. We saw the catalyst here. I think that it's probably going to overshoot in the price. I think it's going to go over $100 sometime, this year. I think at least by $65, $70 by June. Now, I could be totally wrong, but the overall world is going to be looking at this tiny sector, this uranium sector, eventually, especially if things progress. And, a lot of money is going to be flowing into the sector, I believe. So I'm going to keep an eye on all of this. And I really appreciate the support on the last video, the 1,000 likes. Let's get this video to 1,000 likes too. And be on the lookout for the uranium documentary. I know you guys are excited for that. And there's just so much developing that I want to make sure I get it in there so it's really relevant. And thank you so much for the last 2 years supporting the channel.